Hi there, and welcome back. I'm Mikhail, and today's video continues topic of scroll effects. In the last video, we created a platform for scroll hijacking. Let's use it for implementing an attractive animation. If you are new to the channel, do not forget to subscribe so you won't miss future videos. And for everyone else, grab your coffee and let's get coding. In the previous video, when I explained the concept of scroll hijacking, I used an example of animation from the Apple website with advertising for Apple Watch. In today's video, we'll get back to this animation, but of course we won't recreate this advertisement. So no ad for Apple Watch in this video, and I think on my hand doesn't count. The Apple requisites are in the profile of the channel. And while someone in Cupertino is choosing for a specific link, we will choose an animation. Let's base on that Apple Watch animation and create the same parts and the same effects, but with a different content. We will advertise for something more beautiful, for our planet, Earth. Let's decide which part of the animation we will recreate in our version. There is a huge object, the subject of advertisement, which is scaled down. When the object reaches the appropriate size, it starts a 3D rotation. To achieve this 3D rotation, we will use a Lottie animation. And the object, of course, is Earth, our subject of advertisement. Apart from the subject, there is an interesting fact about it that also appears on the animation. The animation is complex and includes two parts. The first is moving upward, and the second is appearing from opacity. At the end of the subject rotation, the fact changes to an addition to a static title, heading the whole block of content. So we need to treat the whole animation progress as 100% and just decide which parts takes which range. We can move to code and start doing this. Before we start, let me briefly show the starting point from which we begin our journey. This is a pretty simple example application that I already created with a bunch of dummy objects which just allow us to scroll content between which we will put our animation. Apart from that, I also added few libraries which we will need. This sliver catalog, which contains that sliver we created in the previous video, and a library for playing Lottie animation. Apart from that, project contains a small asset, an animation of globe that we will use in our implementation. Let's try to analyze the animation which we have seen on the website of Apple and define which part of our animation takes which part of the range. First of all, we have a part which is Earth spinning. There is a part of animation where there is no rotation, and there is a part where there is rotation. And they can be roughly separated as a 25% without spinning, and then all other part is with spinning. Let's put this. No spinning until. And the spinning part, since it's animation playing with a Lottie, it's just linear playing. Apart from spinning, we have a scaling of this Earth animation. So roughly we can separate this into 4 parts. First of all, we starting from a huge scale, about 3, and going down to 1.5. Then we have only rotation part. So in the term of scaling, we stand still, for example, from 30% to 60%. And after this, we additionally scale a bit from 1.5 to the natural size 1, and finishing of this animation from 90% to 100 is just keeping this size. Let's try to describe this. Earth scaling. Apart from the Earth part of animation, there will be effect, which is also animated. Let's describe both two parts of this complex animation for the fact. The first part is moving up, about 100 points, for example. Fact moving animation. This moving animation also has two stages. First stage is active when we move up this fact and then just stand in the position. And the first active part for this fact matches with the no spinning part of the Earth animation to don't have too many movements in our animation. So let's make this. And the second part is from 25 till the end, just stand at 0. Apart from moving part, there is a transparency part of this fact animation. Fact. And there are 4 stages for these changes of transparency. In the beginning, while we're moving this part upward, we also change in transparency from the completely transparent to fully visible. After this, we keep this fact visible, completely visible without changes. And when we get at about half of the progress animation, we need to start removing this fact and make it also transparent and replace it with a different text. So 4 stages. First of all, then from 25 to 50, half animation, we just stand. And then from 50, let's make it this, is out. And the end, we don't need to show this anymore till the end of the whole animation. And the last part of our complex animation is just some text that replaces our fact about Earth that we showed. I think we can just use a big title styled text with the name of our planet. Why not? Earth name animation. And we also have 2 stages. In the really beginning, we do not show this title because it should appear at the end of this complex animation. So let's make this from 0 till 80%. We do not show. And then we have about 20% of the whole animation that we need to use for showing this also animated. So I think we need a different easing function, more intensive. Let's use fast linear to slow ease in. I hope I have written this correctly. And it's from 0 to 1. So now we described all the parts, and we can describe this decision with the code. To make everything easier, we can describe this animation as a separate class, which will provide the getters, contains separate parts of this animation that we will use later. And as I previously mentioned, the whole animation is managed by our sliver that we will use. Because of this, it will be easier, because all those animation will be controlled by another animation, which will be provide to the constructor of this class. Class content animation. Let's call this way. This class will provide next animations. First of all, fact offset animation, opacity animation for the fact, earth name opacity animation, earth scale animation, and earth progress animation. Let's create a constructor for those class that will take value listenable for controlling our animations. And let's start from creating driving animation. Driving animation, animation from value listenable, and provide here parent animation. And using our decision about which parts of animation takes which behavior, we can describe all those animations as just a twin sequence. Let's describe them one by one. Earth progress animation, driving animation drive, and we get a new animation with this. Child animation here is twin sequence, as I mentioned, with the parameter double. And here we can describe parts which will define behavior. Twin sequence item. Let's get back to our decision. We're describing Earth progress animation, Earth spinning, and there is no spinning for the first 25%. We can just keep this weight. And twin here is a constant twin with a 0 value. And create the second sequence item here, which takes 75% and can be already described. We're starting from 0 and end at 1. This way we describe this animation. Quite easy, right? So we can go through all of them and create the same description for every. The next is Earth scaling, so we can just do the same. Driving animation, drive, and describe our animation. Here's twin sequence double and a place for describing sequence items. We can copy this one and adjust them. We need 4 for those animation with the different weights. And in our case, it's better to change their positions. So from 3 to 1.5, then we have a constant twin with this value, then we scaling from 1.5 to 1 and finish with a simple 1. The next animation that we have here is fact moving animation. So do exactly the same things. Here we also better to switch them, because initially there is movement and then standing still. And different weights. Initially it's 25 because we take the small part of this animation for moving, and then all other part is just being 0. The next thing is fact opacity animation. For this animation we have 4 stages. So let's copy from here and adjust values. First of all, values are equal to 25, 25, 25, and just update values which we are using here. From 0 to 1, then keeping 1, then from 1 to 0, keeping 0. From 0 to 1, keep 1, from 1 to 0, and keep 0. And the last animation is left is just first name animation, opacity animation. Initially it's constant because we do not showing anything, and the last part from 0 to 1. Let's also put everywhere the double values, or make it consistent and do not cause any problems with something like this. And you also can notice that here I mentioned in a few places not linear changing, but changing with the easing function. It's quite easy. Let's take a look on one of them, like this, Earth scaling. We have here twin, which we can chain with the additional improvement and applying a special easing function on top of this. Chain, and here we can say curve twin and define which curve describe our transformation. Curves. and do this for each animation in which we need to apply specific easing function. After we did it for all animations, we can use this animation class to describe how our content will be transformed. Let's create a specific widget which will use our prepared animation. And insert it here between few lists of dummy objects. The behavior of this widget will be in taking the whole amount of space that we have for screen and get additional consuming amount of space twice as we place on the screen. And based on the scrolling of this consuming progress, we will play animation. Let's start from getting height of our screen. And for that behavior I described, we will use scroll-hijack sliver. For consuming space, as I mentioned, we just use 2 of these heights. And let's build the content of our widget. Let's just return, for example, container with a specific size, which we defined, everything that we have. And apart from that, the color. I think that will match with our globe quite fine. Let's run our initial version. Let's run with macOS and check how it will looks like. So we can see a simple result. As soon as we reach this part, we can continue scrolling. It's consuming some progress. And when we consume everything that we wanted, we move out from the screen. It will be our entry point for defining the content of this animation. And as it's done with the Apple Watch animation, we also have 2 parts, independent header and the animated content. Let's do the same. For this we will use column and describe children. Let's start from and also use expanded for all other parts and put here placeholder for beginning. Let's move text to a separate widget. Let's call this header. Pretty simple. And to not postpone, work on this part, we'll finish it and make this our beautiful home. Let's add some style here. Let's make it white and bold. Of course, it can be not found, so let's make it null. So apart from that, let's also add a small padding around this. For example, 16. Now we can move to animated part of our widget. So let's create a widget which will be driven by the consuming progress value listenable that is provided to, from scroll-hijack sliver. Let's call this advertising content, and we need here value listenable that we can use for driving our animation we previously defined. And let's use it here. First thing which we will do here is creating animation from our progress value listenable and put this animation into variable. So late final, our content animation, let's call this animation, and use init state to create this animation. And to manage all those parts which independently from each other moving and appearing, we will just use a stack, because if we use all those parts as a positional, for example, stack will take the whole space that we provide to this, and we can just align on the different parts of the stack all things which we need. Let's start from the biggest and most significant part of our animation, the Earth Lottie animation that we will rotate and scale. For doing this, let's create a separate widget that will be responsible for playing animation, first of all. Let's create stateless widget, call this Earth. For simplicity, let's take here content animation. Of course, we can pass only part of this animation, but let's make it simple. Let's use here Lottie asset, set the name, in our case it's assets globe JSON, and for this animation we also set the controller, and controller will be from our animation Earth progress animation. And let's put this into the center. This part responsible for playing this animation based on the progress that we have. But apart from the playing animation, there is a scale part for this animation. Let's also create a widget which will use this widget to manage scaling. Let's also create a stateless widget. Let's call this positioned Earth. And also let's take this as a parameter. To follow the scale, we will use value listenable builder. We'll put here the child our Earth widget, which we created. For controlling the value, we'll use animation Earth scale animation. And the last thing which we need to do is just describe builder. We'll return position fill because we want to take the whole space of the widget that we showing. And apart from this, we will use scale inside. So let's say transform scale. For scale, we use value that we have here. And we also can adjust alignment for this part. And let's put this into top center. Now we can be able to see the result of one part of our animation in action. Let's run this and try to check how it looks like. So part of our animation is ready. We see that when we scroll, we play animation of Lottie file, and we also have a scaling part in place. So we can care about few things which is left. Is a fun fact about Earth that we want to place here, and also the name of Earth that should replace this fun fact. Let's do this. As well, we did for animation, Earth animation, we will do the same with the fact text which we will add and then apply on top of these animations. Let's start from simple stateless widget and call this fun fact. And fact by itself completely static. We don't need anything. We just put here text. I will just copy here fun fact about Earth and apply a style on top of this. So theme of context. And let's make this also white. Let's also add text align here and put this into the center. Now we can use it for position those text and animating this. Let's again create stateless widget and call this positioned fact. And for those animation, for those widget, we already need an animation provided here. And as we remember, those fact is appearing with the two different animations. First animation is moving this upward, and the second is just work with the transparency. So both of them will be used here. Let's start from transparency. For doing this, we can use animated builder. put here our fun fact widget as a child, and then on top of this apply implementation of opacity. For making this a bit more efficient and do not spend resources which can be saved, we just also will check opacity, and if this opacity more than 0, we will show the widget child widget with opacity. If not, we just will ignore this and return the size box shrink. Let's move this into a separate variable. And use it here and here. If opacity more than 0, just return opacity. Let's make all these things positioned. And from left and right, we just put here 0 for centering this. We will adjust this a bit later. And at the top, for now, we put also 0, but we will change this and adjust with the changing of moving animation. Let's wrap this with the fractionally sized box, and let's take 2 of 3 parts available width to keep this fact compact in the center. We also need to wrap this into animation builder. Let's do this. Animation, and here is offset animation that we use here. This one do not have value, and child also is not used. So now we can use the value from this animation to put here at the top. Let's start from moving this to a separate variable, offset animation, and use it here, and use value from this animation inside the builder. And opacity animation can be moved here as well. Now we can see the second part in action and check. Let's see how it looks like. So we have appearing, transparency, removing from transparency. 2 parts are here. Let's add the final one. And again, let's start from static thing. Stateless widget with the name of our planet, Earth. Just text. And let's apply the same style that we applied for header. and make this align center. Now we can create a positioned version of the same widget. Then stateless widget, the shunt earth name. We need an animation here. And for appearing, we can just reuse this part of position fact that's related to opacity. Just copy this, put it here. And we are almost good. Let's just wrap this with a positioned and align at the top. Left, right, all 0. Let's put this animation into our stack and see how it's changed. Seems that animation is pretty similar that we have seen on the Apple website, but with our assets and content that we want to show. In my humble opinion, the result is pretty satisfying, and this should be a good example of implementing the scroll hijacking with the value for your application. I hope this video inspires you to experiment with this package, and do not hesitate to share the result of your experiments below in the comment. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and ring the bell. This was Mikhail. See you in the next video. Bye.